Today we're going to talk about terminology, in particular defensive terminology, in particular the defensive line, and what a technique is. And all that's coming up after the bumper.
What do you mean you don't subscribe to my son's YouTube channel?
Mama, no!
Just snap the damn ball, RJ.
What's up, kinfolk? It's RJ Young. I am not on a step mill. If you're new to my channel, this is your first time here, consider hitting the like and subscribe button because I upload a video every single day. It's always OU related, college football related, sports related. Alright, so let's talk about techniques. Defensive lines, what are they? A technique in football refers to where a defensive lineman lines up on the field. And each one of these techniques has a number that's associated with them. And depending on what that number is, that determines where the defensive lineman lines up in respect to the center. So I'm going to flash a diagram with these particular techniques. As you can see, a 1 technique means lining up just to one side of the center. A 3 technique on the outside shoulder of a guard. And a 5 technique on the outside shoulder of a tackle. I'm bringing up those because those are the ones that you hear the most, as well as lining up on the outside shoulder of a tight end being a 9 technique. Lining up on the inside shoulder of a tight end is a 7 technique. And nobody knows why they're called techniques or why the terminology and the numbers kind of get askew later. To quote Georgia Tech coach Paul Johnson, no one knows why that's the case. They just know that Coach Bear Bryant did it that way and nobody's had the guts to change it since. But for our purposes, what is a 0 technique, a 3 technique, a 5 technique, a 9 technique? Because those are the techniques that you'll usually see an Oklahoma defensive lineman lining up in. A 3 technique is a defensive lineman who typically lines up on the outside shoulder of a guard. A 5 technique is a defensive lineman who typically lines up on the outside shoulder of the offensive tackle. So in a 3-4 defense, like the one that Mike Stoops runs, the defensive line is usually made up of a nose tackle and 2 defensive ends. The defensive ends typically play a 5 technique. So like a strong side defensive end like Kenneth Mann or DJ Ward in 2017. Usually, when you talk about a 3-4 or a true 3-4, that means that the defensive lineman will be responsible for 2 gaps. Hence the term 2-gap defense in running plays. So when we're talking about a guy who looks like a 5 technique, we're normally talking about a fella who's close to 300 pounds. 280 pounds is pretty small for a 5 technique. And these are by NFL standards. A 0 technique, the guy that lines up over the top of the center, what we call over the nose tackle, usually is pushing 330. This is the Jordan Phillips type of character. This is the Devontae Lampkin. This is the Space Eater. You're more likely to see 3 techniques and a 4-3, which is a 1-gap defense, which means that each defensive lineman is only responsible for 1 gap instead of 2. This man is usually quicker than a 1 technique, which is a person that's just off the nose, but also can take on double teams and win. Think about a guy like Ndamukong Suh. Now in Mike Stoops' defense, you'll also see defensive ends lined up in a 7 technique as the weak side defensive end like an oboe, or a 9 technique, which is just outside of the tight end like Eric Stryker used to do. And that's the reason why Mike Stoops' defense is frustrating to watch, is because you always know that at least 3 guys are responsible for 2 gaps, and there's the wild card of the oboe roll, the striker roll, that can line up in a 5 technique, but can also line up in a 7 or a 9, because he'll have to drop back for tight ends, or chase wheel routes with a running back, or do what he does best usually, which is pass rush. That's what a technique is, and that is the role of defensive linemen when we talk about 5 techniques, 3 techniques, and so forth. I hope this is helpful for you. If it is, please leave a comment below. Tell me what other Football 101 videos you would like me to do. I love football. I want people to better understand the game. That's the purpose of the Football 101 videos. If you like the videos, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you tomorrow. Deuces.